On today's show, I don't think all of the Cavs struggles so far are real this season. I'll tell you what I think is real. I'll tell you what I think is fake. And Justin Rowan stops by to do the same on this edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi everybody, my name is Danny Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers over at my Substack, The Inside Shot, and you're listening to another edition of Locked On Cavs, which is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now America's #1 sports podcast network. You can find this show and any other Locked On pod anywhere you get them. That's Apple, that's Spotify, that is anywhere else. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and make sure you're subscribed. Apple, Spotify, and YouTube as well. Hit the thumbs up button and hit the notification bell too if you're watching us right now on YouTube. And today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDONNBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Justin Rowan from the Chasedown podcast stops by today. We play Real or Fake with a lot of different things pertaining to the first 25 games of the Cavs season. We recorded this on Tuesday, so the standings have changed a little bit. I do think I mentioned that in my conversation with him, where the Cavs are now in 7th place in the East because the Miami Heat lost to the Orlando Magic in the NBA Cup quarterfinals on Tuesday night. So the standings have changed a little bit, but this is mostly a big picture thing, how we feel about the Cavs in terms of where they're at in the standings, what the record is. Evan Mobley so far this season, the Cavs offensively, the Cavs defensively. We dive into a lot of really good stuff. So here's my conversation with Justin Rowan. And now Justin Rowan makes his triumphant return to Locked On Cavs. You know him from the Chasedown, and now you know him from today's edition of Locked On Cavs. We're going to play a little bit of a game today, Justin. We're going to play Real or Fake, where we're going to discuss things that have happened so far this season in the first 25 games with the Cavs, which you may have heard have not necessarily gone according to plan, as they are 14-11 and currently sitting at 8th in the standings, although we're recording this on Tuesday. In Miami or Orlando is going to lose and potentially bump the Cavs up to 7th in the standings. But as we're talking, they are 8th in the Eastern Conference right now, which to me feels like a very fake thing. But I just want to start with the record, because even though they are 14-11, I think we feel it's so complicated. Like, we are talking about this team like they are 11-14, but still the 14-11 record feels like something that's fake to me as far as what I project for their future still.
Yeah, I think it is fake. Like, it's not a reflection of who they are, but I do think like there's a little bit of truth in every scenario, right? And I think you and I were of the same mind where, yeah, injuries were a major factor against going back to against the series against the Pacers, but they could have played better than they did despite all of those injuries. And I think that's what we've seen this season. We know that this team is a better roster than what they've shown. We know that they're going to be better when they are healthy. But I think they could have played better than they have to this point, despite some of the, guys in and out of the lineup. So there's some truth to it, but overall, this isn't who this team is.
I completely agree with that. Like, they have underachieved. There's no way to gloss over that. There's no way to say that that's not a truth. Like, they have the talent in the roster, I think, to be a team that should still be at the top of the Eastern Conference in terms of record, even if they have had, which I do think is another thing, in addition to the injuries, the fact that they've played 25 games and had as many back-to-backs, the fact they've had 2 separate instances of 5 games in 7 nights. Like, I do think that those things add into the fact that they are struggling and they haven't necessarily had the time to figure some things out. But I look at them and say, all right, I don't feel great about the preseason prediction I made where I said I think the Cavs would win 60 games again this season. I just don't see that happening. They would have to only lose 11 more games the rest of the season, which I guess could happen. I would be a little surprised if that's the case, but I still look at them and say, okay, maybe you don't hit the win total over. Maybe you don't get to 57 or 58, but this should still, in my opinion, be a team that gets to 54, 55 wins. And I think that there's going to be a lot of looking back at the start of the season, just be like, remember when everyone was freaking out about the Cavs?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be that. I said it on our podcast last night, but if you put a gun to my head and ask me how to predict what's going to happen the rest of the season, I think they're going to figure it out and go on a winning streak. I think they're going to regress and show some of these bad habits again. I think they're going to figure it out once again and go on a winning streak. And then we'll see what version of this team shows up in the playoffs. Like, reality is, we got 5 months until the postseason. These NBA seasons often feel like multiple years crammed into one that can take on so many different shapes and sizes here. So I think that they are going to figure it out in the relatively near future. And we're just going to see, can they sustain it beyond that?
So I agree with certainly most of that, but I want to hear your reasoning why you feel very confident they will figure it out.
Because I do think some of it is health related, and I think some of it, part of my belief is they looked and sounded dejected after the last game. And I think you just kind of reach that breaking point, right? Like, I do think that a lot of the issues with the Cavs come down to effort, right? Whether it's, not that they've accomplished something in the postseason prior to this point, but everything they have accomplished has come down to regular season success, right? Like, they know that they can be a really good regular season team. They know that it doesn't mean anything for the postseason. So when you're facing a 6-7 month long season, hopefully longer than that, when you have the aspirations that this team has, I think there is that very human element of having a little bit of trouble getting up for it, right? Like, we're just trying to find that motivation, particularly to do what you need to do with how many guys are out of the lineup, right? It'd be one thing if everyone just had to do what their job normally would be. I think the Cavs would be able to kind of coast by on talent. They would be able to kind of lean on what's been successful in the past. But when you're in a situation where everyone has to do more, and you're trying to, refine that motivation to just get back to where you were before, I think that's a recipe for a disappointing slow start.
Well, speaking of slow starts, real or fake number 2 I wanted to get to is Evan Mobley's start, because he came into the season, or I guess entering this season, we all anticipated Evan to take another leap forward, and I think it's fair to say that has not been the case so far this year. His numbers, I think, are a little bit better than we talk about them being, but it's also fair to say that he's gotten off to a slow start. So is it real or fake that this slow start is going to prevent him from taking that 5th-year leap that we thought we would see coming off of a very good all-NBA type season last year?
I think that's fake. I think that's fake as hell. I don't think it would be what prevents him. Again, it is a really long season, and guys can turn it around. Particularly when you talk about player leaps, it's almost more typical to see them put it together in the middle of the season than it is to come into the year looking like a brand new player. I think when you see that kind of brand new player vibe from someone, it's usually someone that hasn't shown anything really, or has only really shown glimpses, and then they're finally putting it together. But when you talk about someone like Evan Mobley, who's trying to add new aspects to his game, you're going to have a bit of a learning curve getting that to NBA speed, right? Where you're playing against NBA defenses, they're scouting what you're trying to do, they're trying to make you feel uncomfortable, and you're in a situation where you're not playing with real point guard play, right? So I think Mobley right now, his biggest issue to me is that I can tell that he's processing, right? Like, I can tell that he's thinking about what he wants to do out there, when that hasn't been the case in the past, right? Like, for the most part, this guy's a supercomputer. He sees things and makes the right plays instinctually. I think when it comes to Mobley, the rest of the season, I think the game's going to slow down to him. I think he's getting more comfortable picking his spots already, and I expect him to be able to figure that out.
So I wonder if getting off to a slow start is just who Evan Mobley is going to be. Because if you look at who he was last year, and I think that this is a very important thing, like, Evan didn't take off until basically a year ago right now. That was the game in Charlotte where he hit 6 threes. He scored a career high 41 points. Like, he was awesome. And I think I looked at that as the turning point for him. And I also think that he's a pretty good case of development is not necessarily a linear thing. But that game happened on December 7th of last year. So that was right around a year ago right now where he really started to turn it on. Because if you look at the numbers for his first 22 games last year, which took you from opening night until December 5th was his 22nd game he played, they're pretty similar to where he's at this year, averaging 17, just under 18 points a game. His assist numbers were way down, but his rebounds are about the same. He was shooting the ball a little bit worse from beyond the arc than he is this year. Like, there are things that I look at and say, he's actually ahead of where he was a year ago right now. He's obviously not ahead of where he was at the end of last season, but I do think that there's going to be a moment that happens soon. And I don't exactly know what that moment looks like, when it's going to happen. I can't tell the future on that. If I could, I probably would not be doing a podcast. I'd probably be doing something else with my life. But I do think that type of thing is going to happen soon. And I think, especially as the rest of the Cavs get healthy too, because I think that has had an impact on Evan. But I think when that does happen, Evan is going to, at a certain point this year, be talked about in a way that is a little bit better than who he was at the end of the year last year.
Yeah, I think so as well. And even looking back to the season where he had knee surgery in December, he kind of came on and had an even better finish to the season than he had prior to the surgery, which almost makes no sense, because you'd think, okay, you're coming back from an injury, you're not going to have the same pop, you need to get your conditioning back. But he came back and he was showing more of a jumper than he had demonstrated to that point. I think Mobley, I anticipate him figuring it out. To me, the interesting thing is, it does feel like there's been a little bit of a drop off in terms of his defensive impact. I think when he's in position, he is still Evan freaking Mobley and does a lot of great things. But there's just been times, particularly in those single big minutes, where it just doesn't feel like the same level of rim protection and defense has been there this year. But basketball is such like every facet of a basketball game impacts everything else, right? So when you're not hitting shots and teams are out in transition more, and no one's kind of playing with a rhythm, and the focus is kind of coming in and out, like that's going to have an impact on every single aspect of the game and every single player in the lineup. So I think as everything normalizes with the Cavs, I expect Mobley on both ends of the court to continue to take those forward steps.
I'm curious from your perspective, because you brought up his individual defense in certain lineups, not every lineup, but in certain lineups having a bit of a drop off. How much of that do you think? Because when I watch them, I think that one of the biggest issues defensively right now is their point of attack defense, which is not something that necessarily is on Evan's plate. So I almost wonder if he doesn't look as good there, because he's having to cover for so many more opportunities in the paint that are created because of breakdowns from other guys. Like, how much do you think that impacts that?
I think that's a big part of it. And I think it's part of why the single big lineup minutes this season have been so poor rebounding, right? Because so often when you're giving up that drive at the point of attack, Jarrett or Evan has to come up and contest the shot. They have to contest that runner or that floater. When you're contesting that shot, that's taking you out of rebounding position. And now you're left with whoever the power forward is, whether that's Dean Wade or DeAndre Hunter. Neither of them are strong rebounders for their position. And everyone else to kind of clean up and end that possession. I think that's a big, big issue. And that was actually one of the focuses of our podcast last night, was looking at the difference in the basketball index point of attack, perimeter isolation numbers, where across the board with the Cavs, it has dropped off. And I think some of that, is a change in personnel. I think some of the effort hasn't been as strong as it's been in the past. But I think a large part of that is they're just not getting set defensively. Like whether they stop the ball in transition and it turns into a half-court possession, or just in general, like, they're not on balance and in position as frequently as they were last season. And I think that that's one of those things that with effort and communication can improve. And as I mentioned, teams getting out in transition off of those missed shots and those missed threes in particular, that's something that's going to normalize once they start shooting like we know that they're capable of.
I think with all of this, like, it's just all so connected. Like, you could blame the defense for maybe not being the compete level, as Kenny Atkinson likes to say, that it should be at all that frequently. Or you could just say, hey, if you guys make more shots, maybe you would be able to be set defensively. And when you're set defensively, it's a much easier side of the floor to play than when you're having to scramble. But I am glad that you brought up the offense at least a little bit. More with Justin Rowan in just a second. But first, today's show is brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. That was a long time ago. I was 1 year old that last time the World Cup was in town in North America, on the continent, we'll say. So, and now there's 48 teams. First time ever. The biggest World Cup in history. Let's be honest, getting tickets, usually the hardest part for an event like this, where the World Cup has so much prestige, right? Like getting in the door can be a challenge. Well, not with Game Time, because the Game Time app comes in clutch. It finally gives fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats to the matches that you want to be at. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open up, and buy tickets the moment that they hit the app. Puts the power back in your hand and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. So you pull up the app, and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare great seat views. Plus, there are no hidden fees. The prices include the fees up front, which something I personally am a big fan of. I love that. I don't want to be surprised at the very last second, and there are no last second surprises at checkout with Game Time. Plus, they've got the seat view feature that's a total game changer, because you literally see what the pitch looks like. Yes, pitch, it's called in this sport. Not court, not field, the pitch. You see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat location before you buy. So take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or other event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDON NBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Swipe, tap, ticket, go with Game Time. Today's show is also brought to you by Quo. New year, new systems. And this is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of running a business and think there has to be a better way, right? Like this can't be the best way I'm doing things. Well, there is a better way, because it's Quo. And this episode, brought to you by Quo, spelled QUO, is the smarter way to run your business communications. If you're ready to make your workday smoother and keep customers connected without the headaches, Quo makes upgrading your setup easier than ever. A streamlined system makes such a big difference when communicating with customers. You can have calls, texts, and voicemails in one clean view that keeps everything organized and helps you stay responsive. And you can share one team number, making it so much easier to make sure that nothing gets missed. The last thing you want is for customers to fall through the cracks. That doesn't happen with Quo. So make this upcoming year the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnba. That is QUO.com/lockedonnba, LOCKEDON NBA. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. As for the next real or fake, right now, the Cavs, as we record this, are 10th in the NBA in offensive rating, with an offensive rating of 115.9 points per 100 possession, according to NBA.com. I think I know where you're going to go, but is this offensive rating real or fake?
Oh, it's real. It's totally real. I don't think anything's going to start trending in a positive direction. This is who they are. No, I think that the shooting's going to normalize. I actually think like their offensive diet has improved these last couple of weeks, right? Yeah. And I honestly think that the strong play of Evan Mobley recently, and even Jalen Tyson, I think those are positive indicators that the offense is getting healthier, because neither of those guys are like self-creation wizards. They can do it in spurts, but they really thrive off of cuts, and they get rewarded for their smart off-ball movement. That is there. The outside shooting component isn't. But I think that the overall offensive balance is much, much healthier lately. I expect, guys like Max Strus, Sam Merrill getting back into the lineup, that's going to help them from a shooting standpoint. Darius getting back into shape, I think, is going to help them from a shooting standpoint. Because really, like, to me, I'm actually curious of your thoughts on this, because I go back and forth with Carter. I think he tends to get a little doomier than I do. I think Darius is moving fine. Like, I think he's been moving fine these last couple games, and it's a conditioning thing with him more than anything else, right? Like, learning to trust the foot, getting back in shape. Like when you don't have that game conditioning, I think it manifests on the defensive end by a lot of reaching and not moving your feet, and on the offensive end, not necessarily getting to your spot. And I'm noticing that he's kind of launching from a little further out, not necessarily on balance, and not having the same touch as a result of that. Do you think that he's still like physically limited, or do you think that this is getting back into basketball shape?
I thought the game against Golden State on Saturday was the best he's looked in terms of how he's moving around. Now, he shot the ball really poorly and did not have a good game. And I do think that the getting back into shape thing has shown up defensively. And we have seen him in foul trouble a number of times when he's been back. And I think that is a result of that. And I do think too, like when he first got back, he was not moving at the level that he needs to be moving at. But I watched that game against the Warriors and I sat there thinking in real time, like Darius looks good. And that was, I don't know if it was the first time that I felt that. Like maybe I had felt like he had looked better than the time before in previous games. But Saturday was the first one, like, that's Darius Garland. Like, that is the guy that looks and is playing like Darius Garland. And his touch around the rim feels a little bit off too still, which I have no worries about that coming back. I just think that he's way too good at that for that to just be gone forever. I don't have worries about his 3-point shot starting to fall. I do think that the more he plays, the better he's going to be. But I was actually and it sounds so crazy to say, and I know that like it's something that's almost a little laughable. I was really encouraged with him on Saturday, even though he had an abysmal shooting game.
I felt the same way. I thought it was the best he's moved since that, setback against Miami. Like I really thought that was the best he looked physically. Like he disrupted that shot at the rim, right? Like he got right up at the rim. I don't think
Darius Garland rim defender, baby.
Yeah, right. Like I don't think he got credit for the block, but he got up there in that situation. So I definitely think him getting in shape is going to be a big part of that. We talked about the defensive drop off for him. I think you've really kind of felt that at the point of attack. It's translated to the tracking numbers. It's the worst it's been since 2020, 2021. So, this is, I think it's a process for him and everyone else, man. Like, I think his shooting is going to normalize. I think DeAndre Hunter's shooting is going to normalize. Jalen Tyson is going to come back to earth. I don't think he's like a 48% 3-point shooter. So that's going to come back the other way. But getting Max, getting Sam, getting, these guys back, not only are they better shooters than, Luke Travers going out there, Nacon Tomlin, who I really enjoy, but isn't a 3-point threat. They also are just smart basketball players that are going to get better quality shots for everybody else. So I think, as you said before, it's all connected.
I'm glad you brought up the 3-point stuff because that to me is like the thing that's going to pick up. And I looked up this on Synergy the other day. Between last year and this year, I understand that the roster is not exactly the same, but last year the Cavs were 4% better on unguarded catch and shoot threes than they are this year. They shot over 40% last year. They're shooting like 35.5% on unguarded catch and shoot threes this year, which is just wildly low for a team with shooters of their caliber, even with guys out. They're shooting on guarded catch and shoot threes. They shot 34.5% last year. They're shooting 28% this year. That's down over 6%. Like, I just look at that stuff and say at a certain point, these guys are too good for those things to not normalize. And yes, having Sam Merrill out there certainly will help the guarded catch and shoot three numbers because he takes some really tough shots and he's an awesome shooter in that area. I think Max Strus will help that. And I think that having Darius Garland out there will probably, a better version of Darius Garland out there, will probably also lead to some, I don't know that it's like saying better unguarded catch and shoot opportunities, but I think you might be having the correct guys in the correct spots for those unguarded catch and shoot opportunities. Like instead of certain guys, like, and you mentioned Jalen Tyson, he's been awesome so far this year, but what does Jalen Tyson look like playing 18 minutes a game instead of 28 minutes a game? How do guys look in the roles that they were supposed to be in? And I think the health will kind of knock that back into place. And in turn, I think the shooting will really rise because of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. You're not penciling in Jalen Tyson as the future starter here? Come on, you're not riding the wave?
Depends what you call as future.
Okay.
I
Fair.
think there are a number of different ways they could go. I think that's a very interesting conversation about what the starting lineup should look like for the Cavs. I know I felt one way at the start of the season. I don't know that I feel that way right now. But I think that's a conversation we probably have if like when Max Strus gets closer to playing. Like, is that a change? More with Justin in just a second. But first, today's show brought to you by Zocdoc. Guys, it's 2025, almost 2026. The new year is almost here. And also, the days of waiting for something to become a full-blown emergency before you see a doctor, those days are over too. Like 2025 is almost gone, and so are these days. Because there's no more walking it off for 6 months. There's no more pretending that the weird shoulder stiffness, hey, this sounds like me, is just sleeping wrong. It's time to take your health seriously. And Zocdoc makes that easier than ever, because staying healthy is more than just hitting the gym or eating right, things that you very much can't control. It's about actually getting things checked out when something feels off. Using Zocdoc makes scheduling easier. You can search for in-network doctors and book right in the app. There are real appointment times that are listed, including same-day visits with a doctor. There's no more back-and-forth phone calls or waiting weeks to try and be seen for something that is urgent. They're super helpful for routine checkups and for the little issues that you've been meaning to get checked out, but you continue putting off. The app is also quick, clean, and honestly removes a lot of the stress of finding the right doctor. So stop putting off your doctor appointments today and get the care that you need. Go to Zocdoc.com/LockedOnNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. Again, Zocdoc, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA today. Also wanted to remind you guys about the Everydayer Club with us here at Locked On. If you have not checked it out, now is the time, because you can make your Locked On Cavs listening experience better. All you got to do, join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Cavs with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and so much more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to the link in the episode description, both on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, to join. But if you want to become a Locked On Cavs Everydayer, that is how you can do it. Now, here's more of my conversation with Justin Rowan. Maybe I'll ask this, like, real or fake, the best starting five for the Cavs is Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, Allen, and DeAndre Hunter.
That I'm not positive on, right? Like, I think you have to think not only of the starting lineup, but what's your best way to balance 48 minutes, right? And I think when you have a lot of guys deserving of playing time, it needs to be merit-based. I think that's how Kenny has basically operated his entire time here in Cleveland. It's worth saying, when the core four is out there this season, they do have a plus 28 net rating. Like, that matters. When they're out there with DeAndre Hunter, it's a plus 18 net rating. It's not like that lineup has sucked. That lineup just hasn't been out there a whole lot. So that needs to be said. But if Kenny feels, hey, Jalen Tyson's doing a good job here and we want DeAndre to do a little bit more, we want to kind of get back to some of the self-creation that he had at the start of the season. And he might have more opportunities to do that with the second, with the bench lineups. There's probably maybe a case to, hey, Tyson's going to be a spot starter. He's going to play less in the game than DeAndre and Max, but he allows us to go from that lineup that works to, okay, now we're staggering where Donovan, Evan, and Jalen sub out. We're bringing in Sam, Max, and DeAndre, and Darius is running a hell of a spread out pick and roll with those guys, right? Like, I think that there's a lot of interesting ways to go. The important thing is Jalen Tyson has to maintain this. For this to even be a conversation, DeAndre Hunter needs to not have the positive regression that I think both of us anticipate him having. So I don't know how much merit there is to the conversation at this point, but I do think the fact that Kenny has options is an encouraging thing.
Well, and with the options, it means one of those guys is going to be your seventh or eighth guy, right? Like, that is something that matters too, because if one of those guys is the sixth, seventh, or eighth guy on the Cavs, you feel really, really good about where this roster is. Whereas opposed to, and you mentioned Naquan Tomlin earlier, like, he's been one of the best stories, I think, of the season for the Cavs. I think Tyrese Proctor has too. But I think right now, a team that has one of those guys as a seventh or eighth guy probably isn't a championship caliber roster. Is that fair to say? But if that guy is the 12th guy, I think it's a different story. And when the Cavs are healthy, like, that's the story that their roster tells, not what it is right now. And I just think that kind of perspective is important to keep.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think everyone's going to be in more normal roles for them. And that's when you can really kind of dive into, are they qualified for this? Or are they equipped to do what we need them to do in order to get where this team is hoping to go in spring?
All right, let's flip over to the other side, because we did real or fake for the offense, real or fake for the defense. Their defensive rating is 113 flat. They are 9th in the NBA in defense. Are you buying that this is a top 10 defense when they're fully healthy?
Yeah, I mean, if they're a top 10 defense now, I think they're going to maintain that when they're healthy. I do still have some concerns when it comes to the point of attack defense. I think not having someone that you fully trust to shut someone's water off when, or slow them down when they do get going. That's something that concerns me, because really the most qualified person to do that right now is probably Max Strus, right? Like when you're talking about the guard position, it's probably Max. If you're talking about a wing, it's probably DeAndre. I feel pretty okay about DeAndre's ability to make someone work. I wish he was a little bit better off ball, but on ball, I feel confident with him. But Max is coming back from a foot injury. I wouldn't be surprised to see his return look a lot like Darius's, where, all right, there's going to be some stops and starts where, hey, there's, a little bit of a flare up in the ankle. It's not where he injured, but it's related to overcompensating. We're going to need to give him a couple games off here and there. Like, that's probably what the return is going to look like. So you just don't have that, like, Isaac Okoro, all right, this is your role. You're going out there. You're going to make them work. We're throwing you on Jalen Brunson right now. So the team is kind of forced to do it by committee here. I think it can work, but it may take some kind of thoughtful consideration on how aggressive do we want to be defensively. We obviously, that's one of the main things they're experimenting with this year, but does that aggressiveness, does that going for steals and event plays compromise the integrity of your defensive shell? Because if you're not able to do it on a one-on-one basis, that means everybody has to be in position and at least, make an effort to stay in front of their guys. That, right, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is kind of where they should be defensively. Like, even with guys out, I look at them and maybe could they be 7th? Could they be 8th? Sure. But like, I think that this is kind of the ballpark for what I expect them to be on the defensive end of the floor, even when they're fully healthy. Like, I look at the offense right now as just a complete farce that they're as low as they are, because I think they have so much talent and it's going to click, and they're going to go through stretches where they look like the best offense in basketball again. There's nothing that can happen where I'm just going to think that the thing that separates them from being like upper tier average to all-time great is Ty Jerome. Like, I'm just not going to ever be able to get there for as good as he was last year. I don't think that was the secret sauce, but defensively, I think that this is who this group is, because you brought up the perimeter point of attack stuff, and they don't necessarily have somebody that I look at and say, that is the stopper, right? A few years back when they finished number 1 in the NBA in defense, Isaac Okoro was that guy, but Isaac also is a negative on the other end of the floor. And the Cavs want to be a team that has balance, that can have guys that are role players that can't be played off the floor. And I understand that aspect of roster building. I thought it was smart in the summer. I still think it's something that should work for them when the postseason arrives. But I also look at it and say, well, unless you've got a lockdown guy at both levels, both like on the perimeter and near the basket, where the Cavs do have that near the basket, they've got one of the best defensive players in basketball in Evan Mobley. But if you don't have someone that is like that on the perimeter, I think it becomes really hard for everything to work together. And I think that has led to the Cavs fouling a little bit too frequently. I do think that them trying to turn the aggressiveness up has also led to some fouling and also some open shots for opponents. Like, I think that is part of their defensive story, is that they are gambling so much more frequently this year than last year. And that means that sometimes you lose those gambles. Sometimes you win them, and they've done a good job creating points off turnovers, but sometimes you lose those gambles. And I think that's just kind of all baked in. And it's just like, even though they've not been healthy, it feels about where they should be with this group.
This is a 6 through 10 defense. This isn't a 1 through 5. Like, I don't think that this is a top 5 defense. Like, they don't have the personnel for it, but they don't have like bad defensive personnel. I think they have more than enough talent there. And the tricky thing with Okoro was he was so effective as a point of attack defender, and that's primarily how JB Bickerstaff used him. But Kenny kind of just trusted the guys to guard their man, right? Like, Darius was the primary point of attack defender when you look at the guards last year. They trusted him on Trae Young or whomever, LaMelo Ball, whoever they're playing, right? They trusted Darius in that spot, and it worked well. But Isaac didn't have that activity off ball. So all of a sudden, his effectiveness defensively wasn't, or his most effective role defensively wasn't how they were utilizing him. And then I think you saw a drop off in his overall defensive numbers as a result of that. I am encouraged by some things. Like, Sam Merrill, I think, is playing much better defense than he did even last year. Like, I think, particularly in those one-on-one situations, I think Sam's taken another step forward. Jalen Tyson's defensive numbers went from abysmal last year to pretty solid this year. That's an encouraging sign. And when you look at their ball screen numbers, despite being more aggressive, in those situations, the defense is held up and is comparable to last year. It's those isolation type, situations where they just have not been as good as they've been in the past. And I think that comes down to effort, focus, and, some of it's motivation too, man. Like, you're just not going to play the same level of defense when your shots aren't falling, when you're shooting 24% from three, right? Like, it's human nature. It shouldn't be that way. And as analysts, we can sit here and say, you have to, pull up your shorts and get some stops. But reality is that's tiring as hell when nothing's going right on the offensive end.
And that's why I think that game against the Warriors, they started off by allowing 12 points in the first quarter. And when they realized their own offense wasn't working at all, I think that in the second and third quarter, their defense didn't work quite as hard because they were having such a bad night offensively. And I just think those
that
two
third
things,
quarter, especially, man,
gosh.
if they gave the same effort in the third quarter that they did, even in the second quarter, I think they win that game. It was just so frustrating because I actually thought they came into that game with the right mentality on the defensive end.
I did too. And I also think they win that game if they don't have as a team their worst shooting performance since I believe it was March of April or 2021. Like I found the box score from the last time they shot below 35%. And it was a game against the Pelicans. Like Lonzo Ball was still on the Pelicans at that point. Colin Sexton led the Cavs with 18 points. Because there were 4 guys that played in that game played in that game that are now on the Cavs. Like that was a really long time ago. Basically is what we're getting at. That was a long, long time ago that they had an offensive performance that bad. And I think that's the bigger reason why they lost that game. I know that they can be upset at the effort level and all that stuff, but it just came down to it. Like they missed 70 shots in a basketball game and you're not going to win games when that's the case. But Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, man. Very much appreciate you stopping by. Everyone, make sure you go check out the Chasedown wherever you get your podcast. Justin and Carter do a fantastic job talking about the Cavs. So go check them out after you're done listening to Locked On Cavs for the 5th time on whatever day they put out a podcast. That's how you can help out both of us. So Justin, very much appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Big thanks to Justin Rowan of the Chasedown for stopping by today's show. Really enjoyed getting to talk with him about a lot of the things that we have seen over the first 25 games of the season. The Cavs are back in action tomorrow, and I will have a Locked On Cavs mailbag edition of the show coming first thing tomorrow morning or late on Thursday night if you are watching on YouTube. So as we get out of here, please do us a favor. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcast. That's Apple, that's Spotify, that is anywhere else. And also on YouTube, click that thumbs up button, hit subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. And I'll be back tomorrow talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.